there anything you'd like to tell everyone? I'm 100% not recording like this, but you are very sweet. Hello and welcome to Heather and Hops. My name is Kat, or Catherine, and I'm a knitter based in Hertfordshire in the United Kingdom, and this is my little space where I have documented my knitting journey from my very first project through to now, where I'm delving a bit more into fibre and spinning. And yeah, it's a little space where we've kind of got a really nice fibre community, I guess, and I hope you're well. I actually don't have a drink with me today, not sure why. Unusual, but I hope you've got something to keep you company, whether it's a knitting project or a making project, and some sort of hydration. And I hope that this finds you well. I feel pretty good today, if I'm honest, which is nice. And before I waffle too much, I would like to start by saying this week I don't actually have really much knitting to share, so I'm going to talk about something slightly different. I always explain this when I do, and I think what I'd like to do, and I'll try and put in when things are discussed, and as many links there'll be in the description if needed. I was going to talk about how I started knitting, and how to get started if you're not a knitter. I know that there's a few people here that have asked for this sort of thing, and whilst there is a lot of content, I hope to kind of point you into the right direction of platforms and things for that. And then I think I'll announce the giveaway winner, and I was going to talk a bit about my Dungeons and Dragons thing, because I didn't realise that I haven't shared my dice tray yet on here, and I thought it'd be fun to share some of the things. So that's kind of call to action, so to speak, and I just thought I'd have a little chat. I don't have anything on my needles that I can just knit on. I've got a few things that are in... Oh, hello little Mai. She's in-house kitten, just abandoned ship. Little Audrey. I know some people get very upset when she doesn't join in, and hopefully she will, but she's got mission things to do today. Yeah, I don't have anything to knit on, which is kind of sad, because I felt like just sitting and knitting would be fun, but I don't like having secret projects, but I do have one, and I can't knit on it now. While I'm here, because someone might ask, just so you... I haven't just talked for ages. This is a bit waffly. It's probably more useful for knitters that haven't started their journey yet, have just begun to knit. But I do hope that it provides maybe something useful for those that have been knitting for a long time. And I am wearing, because I forgot to talk about it, this is the Varpu, knitted using brushed alpaca silk. I think I got it right, by Drops, in the black colourway. This is long sleeved. It is the Pure Mesh Pullover by James N. Watts, knitted using Holst Super Soft and in the colour black. And this is one of my favourites. This is the Unicorn Hamster colourway by Hannah, who is the Corner of Craft or Chromatic Yarns, on her sturdy sock. It was a Knitical Roll Club a while back, and I think she was offering it for a while. Don't hold me to that, but she was, so I don't know if she still does. And this is the it's cropped. I've actually pulled it up so that the neckline kind of is held down by this, because I don't like the way this sits usually. but this is the My Secret Summer Crop, I believe. I'll put it on the screen correctly, by Jessie May. These things are really useful to me, but I prefer the ribbed ones. I've said that time and time again, but just for clarification. Also, really good patterns to practice on. Knit and purl decreases, and then a little bit of I-cord straps. I think that's about it. There's a little bit of grafting to do, but it's 12 stitches in total, I think, something around there. So yeah, this is a good learning pattern too. Anyway, back to me. So I think I kind of like to just see what happens. I'm just going to talk with you and we'll see. And for those of you that do knit, this might not be relevant or useful. I hope to discuss how I feel like I managed to kind of skip a few levels quite quickly and improve my knitting quite quickly. But yeah, so I've wanted to knit for as long as I can remember. I was the person at university that mostly wore band t-shirts to uni and for life in general. But if I wasn't, I was more often than not wearing what I used to refer to as my ugly knitwear, which was predominantly jumpers that I had, or cardigans and jackets that I'd rescued from charity shops. In hindsight, a lot of those were acrylic. They were, like, some of them were really wild. I'll see if I can put in some pictures. I had ones that were covered in sort of autumn leaves and they had big acorns all over them. I had cats, I had roses with like a crocheted collar, like a floral crocheted collar. I had a good collection of things that Audrey, troublemaker, that I purchased from charity shops. She's here now. See if we can coax her up. Hello. So I basically, what I'm getting at with that is I always loved the idea of having slightly off-kilter items that almost no one else would have. Things that are either old or have been handmade, and secretly I knew I always wanted to be able to create them myself. I really loved the idea of recreating band jumpers, which is something I would like to do going forward, like famous people's jumpers that I loved, and being able to put my own sort of creative touch into an item. But I was taught by my grandma when I must have been like 6 or 7, and I only ever managed a scarf for my teddy bear, and that was it with my family-based learning. And when I finally was old enough to try again, I felt like this is important to talk about what went wrong, because I think it helps. So when I started to try again, I picked a fingering weight acrylic pattern, which was a Christmas jumper, and it was a very cool pack. It was a set that I was gifted, but it had big long straight needles, so like this, but with a thing on the end, and it was quite fine yarn, so it would have taken forever. I didn't have the skills or knowledge of the difference between knitting flat or in the round. Basically everything, for me, everything that is good for beginning knitting, none of that was there. It was a really simply written pattern. There was not a lot of information in it. I was just trying to, swim up a waterfall. It just wasn't going to happen. So I quite quickly put it down. It sat under my bed for years, and It wasn't until I started crocheting quite prolifically while I was at university and a little bit after that, knitting kind of came on my radar again. I was suffering with RSI from the amount of crocheting that I was doing, and this is something that I'm very aware of now when I'm knitting. I held a lot of tension when I used a crochet hook. That's different now, and I'm quite good at being aware of it. But before, like at the time, I could acknowledge it, but I didn't know how to rectify it. I was just constantly holding tension in both my shoulder and my arm. So it was just, again, it didn't, crocheting, while I do enjoy it and I do love some crochet items, it didn't produce the feel that I wanted from what I was making. So I think I was actually, I was at work and it was a really quiet day where there was absolutely nothing for me to do. And I just randomly put the straight needles that I had from the acrylic jumper set in my bag and some yarn that I was crocheting with already, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll watch a couple of videos and see if I can try knitting again. And I did, and I think by the end of the day I had like a wonky square, and through a bit of googling I realised that there was sort of two main methods of knitting, and I had previously tried to knit English style and I was using my right hand to move the yarn around. But whilst I did my little looking, I realised it was continental, which meant you're holding the yarn in the left hand, which was the same as crocheting. I'm also a left-handed person when I write, but I'm quite ambidextrous in general. I've always learned to do things kind of both ways, but it felt a lot more comfortable using my right hand to control the movement and my left hand to control the yarn. That just seemed kind of better to me, and quite quickly I was like, oh, I need to try something interesting, and I did some more research and I found Kate Davies, and this was about the time that I got very unwell. We won't talk about it too much, but I found it just in time. I managed to pick up knitting and then proceed to spend a lot of time in bed. So basically, that was a kind of slight comparison between the very start of my journey and what went wrong to begin with. And hopefully I can describe how to start and have a bit more success, maybe? What I would say is that I definitely benefited, and this won't apply to everyone, and some people won't want to do it, and that's fine, but I do think what did help was my yoga practice, to be honest. I taught yoga. I'm currently doing a development course in Yin, which I'm very excited by, which is also why I've been a bit quiet lately. I've got quite a few things on my plate. I really have loved Yin yoga for a while, and I'm very grateful to have been offered a scholarship to do this course. I'm very excited to get going on that. I'm about a quarter of the way through. Anyway, so I feel like the skills and self-development things that I learned through my yoga practice, I was able to apply to knitting and learning, and that really helped, both actually in physical sitting and how I hold my body and being aware of tension, both in the yarn and knitting and my body, and mentally through patience and being kind and being able to say, I've had enough for today, I'm too tired, or actually I wonder if there's something else I can do, and that making me more curious made me find maybe more resources quite quickly than some others might. When I decided that I wanted to go a little bit further, I quickly discovered, like I said, Kate Davies, and I've always had, if you've been here a while you'll know, I've always loved Scotland. Something about it feels like home, and then when I was reading about her journey. It's quite amazing, and her like Scottish based designed patterns. I immediately saw a pair of mittens that I just really wanted to knit, and I bought the book. I managed to get a couple of skeins of, I think it was balls of Rowan felted tweed, and tried. I ended up, initially I did have a set of DPNs, and after trying to cast on a couple of times with the help of Very Pink Knits, who I do very much recommend, I ended up ordering a set of pony needles, circular needles, I guess like this, but much smaller and with much less loop. And off I went. Every time I came to a technique that I hadn't done, I was simply using Google. Again, Very Pink Knits came in very handy. I think between Very Pink Knits and Susan Bryant and Roxanne Richardson, those three, between them, that's kind of a crash course in a master's in knitting. If you need or want to learn, they're the three channels that I feel like provide me personally with the immediate information. Also, for socks, if you are wanting to learn about socks, Earth Tones Girl and Hey Brown Berry are the people that I kind of quickly refer to if I want to research. Anyway, so they're the ways that I kind of actually learned to knit, but the other resources I used, and this one's a bit of a problem still, but if you can, Ravelry is one of the best, or it's unfortunately the best platform for finding patterns, and there's forums part on that and groups, but I tend not to dabble in them. They kind of, it's a bit janky to me still, but in terms of patterns and finding designers that you love, I think it is a really good resource to have. Instagram is also very good just for exploring, clicking through other designers and searching that way, but I find that Instagram very overwhelming and quite distracting. So if you are looking to learn to knit and are looking for simple patterns, free patterns, paid for patterns, I do think it's a really good way to go. When it comes to patterns, I find that going with independent designers is usually a better option, and that's for newer knitters. I think once you've got the basics, you could knit from anything. It's like learning a language or just learning a new skill. You need to learn or learning to read, you do need to learn the art of reading it, and suddenly it becomes a lot easier. You can read the shorthand very quickly and you kind of don't even need to guess. But to begin with, it's really nice because a lot of the independent patterns kind of hold your hand. They go through everything. If there's a tutorial that's maybe useful, there will more often than not be a link or a photo tutorial within the pattern. So that's something to think about when you're starting and when you're picking resources, whereas maybe I don't want to pick names, but a Rowan pattern might be as simple as it might just say cast on 30 stitches, knit for 4 inches, bind off to it 2 stitches on each row for the next 5 rows, bind off this for the shoulders, bind off that for the neckline. Like, very simple, whereas an indie designer, whilst might use quite shorthand if you're doing measurements, might say cast on using a stretchy method, cast on using a cable method. You might get a lot more detail in what you actually need to do rather than just assuming you know what method is best for what part. I hope that makes sense. I was using it today. I really liked this. It's really small, It's quite, actually, you could put it in a project bag with ease. When I was learning to knit, this was a really good reference to have. I think it came out about 6 months after I started really getting into it. And it just goes into not too much detail, maybe a paragraph about most common abbreviations and techniques. Yeah, so if you are looking for a very small, simple book that condenses everything to develop your knitting and, you know, not have to maybe go through lots of YouTube, this is a good way to go. There are diagrams I think do cover what you'll need. It is not as in-depth as the YouTube video, but is handy. I also think that asking friends, family, or your local yarn shop is a really good way to go and is definitely not to be underestimated. I didn't get the opportunity to do that. I was really sick and could not leave the house, and then the world closed down. But that's not to say that I still didn't learn from people online. We had lots of knit nights, and we still do, and it is awesome that the group that I've surrounded myself with would in a heartbeat get back to me about something if for any reason I was stuck. So finding that for yourself is also important, I think, and looking, if you're absolutely starting, then maybe going to a class or a knit group locally is a good way to go. If you do want to join the Discord group that we have, I think there's about 400 of us at the moment. I try and prune it once a month, so it is an accurate representation of who's active. I have to say this because I don't like to, it sounds mean. If you do get moved out of the group, the Discord group, it only happens if someone's been inactive for 30 days. You can come back whenever you want. It's just we're all a bit shy and timid, so it's quite nice to just know who you're talking to, you know, the amount of people. But that's a really good place to ask questions if you are beginning. There's lots of lovely people that are very experienced, way more experienced than I am, that are usually happy to help. So yeah, I think having something that you're very excited by and the right tools does make a big difference. I know that there's the saying, you know, a craftsman should never blame its tools, but I don't think that's fair or right. It makes a huge difference. It really does. And in knitting, for me, that's more about comfort. So I found that the pony needle that I was using didn't have a nice join. There was something that caught, and one of my most irrational things that makes me angry is cotton wool, and when it gets stuck, and that catching actually had the same effect on me. I was like, ugh, it didn't make me feel very nice. And I'm usually quite a chilled out person, but every now and then it made me feel so that did encourage me personally to look at other brands and do some research on needles. And we actually I've shared a video about needles where I talk about it in depth, but as much as the video's okay, and I feel like I covered my journey, reading other people's journey is really important, I found, and the comments on there really helped me to feel like there was places I could investigate and learn and continue to learn. But doing some research on the needles did make a big difference deciding on what length. I found that for bodies and larger items I prefer a 5-inch needle on my cables, whereas when I'm doing hats or smaller circumferences I like a 4-inch needle. I've discovered that I don't like magic loop through practice, and I think everyone should play. Some people only work magic loop, and that's totally valid. But what that means is you'll have a much longer cable and you'll be turning and going back and turning stitches rather than just knitting in a big round, which is, I find, much more enjoyable. But once I purchase some some needles that I loved, suddenly I wanted to knit more. It was a lot more comfortable. I wasn't fighting the cable. Some people like a really sturdy cable. I quite like I have actually grown to really love these, which were, thank you so much Amanda, sent to me as spares. Lovely Amanda had spares and sent me some to try, and I really like these lace cables on the Chalgu. Higher Height is still up there. I would be happy to use either without any level of complaints, but Higher Height has been with me since the beginning, so do hold a special place. And bamboo. So I do love bamboo, and I use my bamboo needles a lot more in the winter because, again, for comfort, the bamboo stays a bit warm and is a bit more gentle on the hands, but I still use metal needles all year round. Also, I think it's important when you're starting to choose a pattern that you really love and an item that you really love, because you will be encouraged to knit it. That's a good motivation. I'm not really. I am when it comes to like these little tops. This is a Jessie May, my secret little crop. When it comes to this sort of item, I am a bit of a product knitter, I guess, but generally I like the process a bit. I love the process, so that's why I'm knitting, but the outcome has to be something that I want to be useful. Otherwise it's easy to kind of lose motivation if you're not seeing progress. Again, that was me at the beginning a little bit, but now what happens happens when it happens, as long as I meet deadlines if I've got them. One sec. So I am trying to, this is weird, but hopefully it's not, and it is useful to some of you. I think also yarn plays a big difference. Even now, I have no issue purchasing yarn that I need to purchase, in that sometimes you cannot afford a hand-dyed, completely traceable yarn. I really wish that was not the case for me personally, but I won't judge anyone for anything. But finding yarn that you love does make a difference, I think, and really having a think about that, because whilst it might, I mean, actually I'm wearing quite bright. I've gone like, I don't know, Winona Ryder in Beetlejuice goes bubblegum emo, I don't know, something like that. But knitting with something just because it looks fun in the ball is very different to knitting something that you're going to love and wear. Sometimes those worlds collide, and that's awesome. And I do try my best personally to do that, and I've learnt that through, we'll talk about that in a bit. But I think they're important things ahead of time to think about if you are considering knitting. It's doing a bit of research on yarn, on needles for you personally. Maybe you like straights, maybe you want that. I found that when I was using straight needles, because of the length, I was a bit more elbows and I couldn't quite find a level of comfort and relaxation, but actually for some they might put it under the arm, and so I think it's important to look at other methods of knitting, needles, yarn that you're going to enjoy knitting with, and maybe that's going to a yarn shop and feeling it rather than just seeing it online and hoping. And I feel like, from experience of friends and family who have discussed knitting and wanting to do it, of almost all of them that have started with a scarf, because that's just the done thing, but that as an object is quite a lot of work unless you're using really chunky yarn, and I don't feel like you'd get enough practice doing the motion. I think there's a statistic somewhere where it's got to be done 33 times and then it's muscle memory, but I think you don't get enough of those small dexterous movements, and you don't get to like fine-tune those motor skills almost. So I personally tend to recommend a hat or a cowl. I think a hat's good because you can do like just a 1x1 ribbed hat, and you'll very quickly see if it's going to be too large or too small, and you can't get too upset about ripping out a couple of inches of yarn and starting, like a couple of inches meaning some meters of yarn, and then ripping it out. So you'd get to practice both knit and purl stitches, and then you'd get to practice decreased stitches at the top if you did a bottom up style hat. And what you can do is insert a lifeline, so insert a row of yarn into all of your stitches before you start the decreases, and then if anything goes wrong when you're decreasing, when you're practicing, you just rip back to there and start from there and try again, without the fear of, you know, having to unravel everything because you can't figure out where you were. And I would say like an Aran or DK is probably best. I feel like DK gives you a bit more time to practice, but Aran's probably quicker for getting a hat knitted. And there's quite a few free patterns for this sort of hat, or this was my own, is what I'm saying. There's quite a few simple beanie hat patterns on Ravelry, so if you do want to start with a hat or cowl, there's loads of options where you won't have to spend too much money to just try. And for colour work, again, I started with mittens, which might have been a bit... if I'd learnt what I know now, I probably wouldn't have started with a mitten, and that's not out of fear or me saying no, because 100% go for it if you want to, but a hat or a cowl would give you more room to practice with thicker yarn, so you can see what you're doing a bit better, and you've got more room to manoeuvre if you're using magic loop or you're working in the round without sliding scrunch stitches up. I feel like there's a bit more room to play with, and you can be a bit more relaxed. And generally, if you're a bit more relaxed without being too loosey-goosey, your colour work would maybe start out a bit better just from that. Oh dear. Audrey! Come on, sweetheart. What? Did you wind up the doggo? Are you naughty? You sausage. So yeah, I did start with a pair of mittens, and they were quite successful. They were probably wonky a little bit. I did a Latvian braid and colour work, so it covered 2 colour knitting, decreases, a Latvian braid which looks amazing and is a lot easier than I made it out to be. The first time I did it, didn't look right. The second time I did it, it's beautiful, and it just looks like a plait going laterally across something. It's gorgeous. Just chasing a tail. I'll film it for you so you can see. What are you doing? Yeah, so in terms of moving through your journey a bit quicker, research probably. I think listening to people that know what they're on about really helps. Speaking to people in real life really helps. The resources that I've kind of touched on, again, are the keys, I think. And then the most obvious and frustrating is practice. And I say practice being frustrating because a lot of people think it is, but once you get a bit more comfortable with knitting, and I think all that takes is just a little bit of time and conscious knitting, so trying to be relaxed when you're doing it and putting it aside if it's not right for you, and when the time's right it will be. you will want to do one more row. And us knitters talk about that all the time. Just one more row, just one more row. And that's when the practice becomes a lot easier, because you will just want to continue. And some people find knitting genuinely addictive, and I totally understand why. It is a lovely thing to do. It really is. So if you haven't tried it, and if you are here and you do knit a lot, which most of you usually are, then you should share that, because it's good, right? It's a good thing to do. And again, that's why I mentioned doing a smaller project to begin with, because I feel the motivation of finishing something is almost more another wave of motivation to cast something on and continue knitting, because you've got the satisfaction of having a garment or an item in your hands that you've made. I think that's part of the reason why I love the idea of spinning to a finished project, because apart from growing the fleece and maybe shearing the fleece, most of that process has been done by my own hands, and I feel like it is like as much magic as I can muster, and I think that it really does feel like magic. I think another way of, other than practicing and kind of choosing your project with joy and consciously, I think to develop quickly, losing expectations is quite important, and that goes from your own expectations on how well you knit or how much you knit or how fast you knit. Also losing expectations of what other people say. You might hear someone say that brioche is really difficult, couldn't possibly try it. Garment knitting's really difficult, couldn't possibly try it. Couldn't do socks, that would be difficult. Like, let go of those expectations, because if it's yarn, unless it's a steek, and I say this quite a lot, so I am sorry it's quite repetitive, but unless it's a steek, it can be ripped out and you can start again. Like, it's fine, doesn't matter. So you're better off just trying and seeing, especially if there's a brioche jumper that you really want, or a colourwork hat that you'd love to knit or gift to someone. Try it. I don't know, it's not that scary, and there's so many resources. There's actually, it feels like there's more and more yarn shops popping up, and yarn festivals even, for courses and workshops to be attended. Just try. There's nothing worse than just being like, oh, I wish I tried that X amount of years ago. Try it on. And I think another way I personally improved really quickly was keeping a project with me at all times. I was at home. Yes, I was in bed for a year and a half. So I always had projects, but I had them upstairs, downstairs, and if I did leave the house, I'd always have something in my bag, so that any moment I was sat down or had a moment to try, I'd just carry on. And I think that's when you start to, first of all, it's really nice for stopping you being at a phone so much or a screen so much. I've also found that I need to make time for reading now, which is a thing, but those little pockets of moments really add up in a day. You know, if maybe you teach, having 5 minutes of your lunch break a day, suddenly that's 25 minutes, and whilst that doesn't seem a lot, over a month, you've done a fair amount of extra knitting than you might usually. I don't know, I just think those little extra moments and learning to pick it up and put it down and reading where you're at, that really helped my eye for it and reading it, and develop my skills, both reading and actually understanding my knitting, but also my motor skills too. And I think watching different makers and learning from different makers really helps. I know I've said this in quite a bit already, but if you don't click with a method of brioche, or you don't click with the way someone's described it, watch another video, ask another person, because something sometimes just clicks. It might take one person to say, oh, you just spread your knitting out a little bit every now and then when you're changing colours, when you're doing colour work, and suddenly you're like, oh, well that makes sense, now that looks lovely. Or, oh, I don't join in around this way, I cast on an extra stitch and I slip it over the first stitch and then I've got a lovely seamless. Those things all add up to making a garment or an item feel nicer for you to knit and potentially look a lot nicer too. So learning from many people and not just seems to be a good way of doing it. Hey you! Oh, you're starting to settle. Knitting with intention also really helps, and I know some people love to knit whatever's popular, and that's cool, and I've got some very popular knits on, but I feel like knitting the things that will truly be what you love, and the fact that we can knit it how we want, to look how we want, to fit how we want, once we do a bit of learning, but we can do that from very early on in our knitting. And by knitting intentionally, you'll enjoy it more, you'll love the outcome more, you'll wear it more, or your friend will knit it more, wear it more, or, you know, maybe if you're trying a new fibre, to knit a bit more intentionally, actually knit a swatch. Highly undervalued and underestimated, and I feel sad that it's got such a bad rep, but swatching will improve knitting, and when I did start swatching more consistently and more thoroughly, my knitting improved tenfold. So that's something I will suggest, and I will put in a video link to swatching, and it's quite a long one. Maybe I'm not going to, I'll see if it's on somewhere else. Anyway, swatching is really important. I 10 out of 10 recommend you do research on that, and that should have been with developing quickly, but that is a really good way to knit intentionally and get the outcome that you want. But swatching also will allow you to see the yarn before you've used lots of it, and it might be that, you know, I love mohair, but it might be that it doesn't sit with you, it makes you sneeze, you don't love how it feels on your body. It might be the same with any fibre, but you'll get a better idea of what it's going to be like before you've used it, and you can swap it with a friend or offer it up. Like, we've got a yarn swap thread in our Discord, and actually that reminds me, because I probably should do a bit of that. Before you've used it and decided, oh, you don't really like it. I think that's a really good way of going, and I don't think that these are separate, because they're kind of together, but budget, quality and ethics all mingle, and I think finding what suits you at the time is important. I love, you know, companies that really think about the ethics behind it and each step of the process being as kind as they can be. But sometimes that's completely not within my budget or anyone else's. So while I do try, I instead, for me personally, I tend to avoid superwash and acrylic and nylon yarns. I love a naturally toothy yarn. So that's what I love, but that might not sit with you, and I think exploring that and figuring out what the way you wear clothes. I am really hard wearing, actually. Mohair being so strong as it is and fine, it doesn't felt. And something like this, it's toothy, it's hardy, it will put up with my wearing. However, this is not as good wearing for me, and I will wear this until it wears thin probably, but for other people something like this is better for them because it feels softer. I mean, I don't think it's softer than mohair, but for other people it is. So I think exploring that will help you to build your wardrobe, if that's what you're aiming for, with a lot more care than just going, oh well, I'm gonna go with that colour because it. And that leads me kind of on to mood boarding. It's not something that I ever previously did, unless I was doing art and at university, slightly different. I've never done it for my own wardrobe, but I found that I've shared these a couple of times now, so I'm sorry if it's again repetitive, but if you're here, I'm assuming you want to learn to knit and that, and this doesn't go in there, but it does. I took a photo close up of each of my favourite items and when I wore them in my wardrobe, and I tried to get an idea of what I was drawn to and what I love, and then divided that into the seasons, and then tried to do one overriding mood board too, so I could get an idea of most of what I love and then what I wear throughout the year as the seasons change. And that really helped me a lot. I knit 2021, I think 2020 I did a bit, a lot more intentionally, and the items that I've knitted have been things that I truly love, and some things I have given away that I didn't anticipate. Like I knitted a lovely elf mail, which is one of my favourite jumpers, but I knit it in a silver and a blue palette rather than a green and gold palette, and whilst actually looking at my mood board it suggested that through the spring and summer that would be good. I didn't wear it. Every time I went to wear it I reached for the green and gold one. So I feel like there's a little bit of redoing to do, and that's something that I'm going to do this week, I think. Well, next week. This week's still very busy. But I feel like I'd encourage you to maybe not necessarily do a mood board, but have a think before you start knitting, because it is time. It's an investment of time and money and energy. Like, you could spend... Alex spent 9 months knitting his first jumper. It probably wouldn't take anyone, or it doesn't take everyone that long, and sometimes it will take longer. But I think you're investing that much time and energy into it. You want it to be worn that much. You want at least 9 months wear out of it if you're gonna, spend that much time knitting it. So pondering that before you even cast on, I think, is quite important and helps, because you might start something and being confident to rip it out if you have considered it and then cast it on, and suddenly you're like, I'm never going to wear this. Having the confidence and being okay with just ripping it out, or being like, actually, no, I'm not going to wear this, but I'm enjoying knitting it. Is there someone in my world that would like it? Then suddenly you can be like, actually, this is a process knit for me. This is something that I just want to knit. And if I can pass it on to a friend or family member, then, yeah. I talked quite a lot more than I thought I would. Hopefully it was not too waffly, and was slightly useful. But I'm going to talk about other things if I just hit pause. My little bean is just sat down there. My little bean. So, I don't know. So if you're here and you didn't watch the rest, that's cool. If you did, I hope it was useful. First of all, I am going to pull a giveaway winner today for supporters of my Ko-Fi, which has made my learning, developing and my journey very special. It really helps. I honestly, I can't tell you how much it helps. It takes a little bit of pressure off of Alex, who goes above and beyond every blooming day. Alex is my husband, it's the best egg ever. And I couldn't do what I do without them now. Like, I just couldn't. I would be forcing myself back into work that maybe I'm not ready for still. I'm very grateful my health has improved a lot. I actually went for a run with Alex on Sunday morning and it was beautiful. I got a lovely picture of a swan. Anyway, digressing. Ko-Fi, I literally couldn't do without it, and I'm very grateful, and I wanted to offer some sort of give back is more what I want to call it than a giveaway. It's more of a thank you and a way of passing back some of that nice energy that I received from you. So I will pop your name on the screen. And if this is you, I will try and message you on Ko-Fi, so just to let you know. But if by the point you see this, congratulations. I haven't messaged you. Drop me a message and send me your address and I'll get some treats out to you because fun. And that really warms my heart. Because it's about connection too. I love the excuse to do a handwritten letter and, you know. Anyway, that's that. And also, since it's been a very D&D week, I am treating myself to waffling at you about some D&D. If you're not interested, I'm sorry and thank you. It's lovely to see you and I hope to see you again soon. I will try and put some nature footage at the very end and I'll try and put a time doodah in the bottom bit. I've never done that before, but I'll try. But I wanted to share, first of all, Sophia's Scroll of Protection, which... What was that, Audrey? I have to say, isn't looking its finest, and my book's not looking its finest because I didn't have my Scroll of Protection to begin with. So it was designed as a dice tray, but I knitted it the same size as the previous box that I used, which just about fitted perfectly my D&D journal. So I felt like it was perfect, and it meant that when I went and did my first in real life game recently, I could put my book in my rucksack without everything getting on it, which was just really novel and quite nice. As you can see, I wish I had it sooner. But it's called Sophia's Scroll of Protection because Sophia is my current main character that I play, and Sophia is... Now I can tell you because I hadn't told the group. Sophia's an Asima and she's a protector, so it just made sense to give it that name. I can show you my sheet. It's not that interesting, but I do put it on D&D Beyond and use that, but every time we level up I put it in here. And yesterday was the day that I told my little troop that I go around with, which we haven't got a name, that she is an Asima. At least one of the group knows in character now, and my character was getting upset that she had secrets. It was all a bit weird because I think we've actually been playing for like 10 months this campaign. Has it been that long? Maybe it's not that long. Wow, yeah, it is. It's the 4th month of 2021, so it has been that long since we've been playing. So it's been a long time of keeping a secret about that, and yeah, so it rolls up. So if you do not need it as a scroll protector, you can just throw this in your bag and it's basically nothing, but you've got a dice tray. What are you doing? So Audrey's playing with the string. You can have that. I'll give you a roll. Or a 10. It's half good. So yeah, it's quite It's quite good. It's nice if you, especially if you've got metal dice, it just means that your wooded surfaces are protected. And I actually knitted Alex one for his character who he played on Saturday. So I ran my first ever game on Saturday, which was slightly terrifying because usually I only play like guide Alex on adventures, but it was really nice. Lots of room for improvement on my part, and it was wicked that whilst 2 of the players were newer, 2 of the players are more experienced. Hi friends, I don't want to call you out just in case you don't want to be called out. But it was really lovely to play if you're here. So whilst I tried to get my head around everything that I was trying to do at the same time, Sarah, Mary, Monica, you're amazing. Thank you for DMing all this time. There was support on the rules and a lot of fun roleplay. Alex's character was called Gruit. He had this sort of halo on his cloak, I think it was. That was, oh, she's clawing me. She wants it. So I added some mohair around the edge. And but I used the kind of colours that his character was wearing. His halfling wizard, he was a stout halfling wizard, which is quite a cool combination. He had been like almost experimented on and taught by a wizard, and the way that you could see like marks from his past was in his veins. They almost looked like tattoos, like green tattoos all over him that kind of lit up as he produced his magic. And he also survived on banana daiquiris. I'm not sure if that's something that's humanly possible or not, but he tried to play it as, yeah, you got your potassium and you got everything you need. It was very fun, really, really very fun, and it accidentally became potato-centric, which kind of makes sense because my character Sophia featured in the campaign at the one-shot briefly, and Sophia is all about potatoes, so it kind of made sense in the end. But yeah, and that kind of leads me on to this one, which I've shared before. I just will show quickly again. So this is my version for my character Lavender, who was my second ever character. This was my version of Fuggle's dice bag, which was from Alex's very first character and someone he's gonna play in a couple of weeks' time. So we've got kind of matching dice bags and trays, but these 2 are free patterns at the moment, and then this one, which I'll tie up because it looks better when it's tied up. This is one that I did make up as I went along, and I have written down, so I hope to share this as another one soon. And this is, oh, I've done this. It's a wonky bow. You'll know how it could look nicer. And there's nothing in there now, but this is Sophia's dice bag. So I do tend to put this inside it at the moment, just to fluff it out, because I don't have that many dice. But this is one that I'm going to write up to, and it's kind of meant to be Sophia is from the Menagerie Coast, Port de Marly, if you want to know. So it's kind of got that vibe to it, and kind of like a shell cover here, and the idea being that it had a flap over the top, because the one time I did, what did I use? I think it was like just a normal drawstring bag. They came out in my thing, in my bag, so this just gives me extra reassurance, because every now and then I do find a dice randomly in my bag, and that is mostly because of adventure workout adventure. But yeah, so hopefully this one will be one that I can share in the future. I am hoping that after this main project's done, I'm going to do a bit more playtime, which will be fun to explore some ideas that I've been having. And then finally, I wanted to share this one because this is what I've been using at the moment, and it is amazing. It's currently got all my dice in it, but this is more special than just a bag because this was made by lovely Joannica, and I'll read it out. I never did the last time. What do you think? Should we read it together like a town crier? Here. Sorry. Not sorry. Dice bag of returning. This is a dice bag of returning because as soon as I received your most lovely package containing the yarn you so lovingly dubbed Grandma's hair, I knew I wanted to give some of it back to you, even if it was just from the last scraps of it. So here you go. A dice bag of returning the last of your grandmother's hair to you. And it is. So this has gone all the way over to another country I'm not going to give away, and then returned all the way back, and it's yarn that I dyed. The light purple is, and it's one of my favourite yarns I dyed, to be honest, because it does remind me of my grandmother's hair. Obviously with the world I've not been able to see her nearly as much, so yeah, I thought that would be fun to show you. I don't know why, it's maybe not, but maybe it was. But I also used these for gifting socks and little gifts at Christmas. I found that it was nicer than wrapping paper, and you can customise it to the person, and you can ignore the cables. Also, arguably quite a good pattern to practice with, but maybe not because of the bottom. It's got a crochet bottom, a little crochet tush. Yeah. I think I've gone really Watford all of a sudden. I think that there's not really much else to say. We had a really nice weekend in the end. We did do quite a bit of worky work bits. Alex did lots of distilling and mashing, and I cracked on where I could. We did have a cartoon morning on Saturday, which was awesome. Vox Machina is out. And that, I've got to say, I loved. I won't give any spoilers away, but oh my goodness, it was good. So much so that we watched it again. Yep, we did. We watched it Sunday morning, and Alex is sold now. He's invested and he's listening to campaign 3, so it's fun. Got someone in-house to talk about the series with. Well, both the series and campaign 3, and we didn't actually start playing our session yesterday for about 25 minutes because everyone was talking about the animated series and their thoughts. But yeah, we also went for a run, like I said, which was really nice. We did the loop that we used to do as our small run together for the first time in, I don't even know, quite a few years, and that was really nice. We took it very slowly, but the weather was perfect, and I felt quite good after it, and I feel quite good today, so I'm grateful for that. Touch wood. Yeah, and I hope that whatever you're up to, you're doing something nice, and you've got something nice planned for this weekend. Currently I don't think we do, which is going to be quite nice. We've got lots of house tidying to do, I think. A little bit of a pre-spring clean, as you would, if you will, between oil painting. Oh, I can show you a quick painting I did of my character Sophia. I'll put that on the screen for you. I am hoping to keep taking away some knitting out of my time, because whilst I love it, I'm just aware that I do a lot of knitting, and that's part of the reason why I do have a lot of items finished, and I kind of want to rein that in a bit, and I'd like to develop my drawing skills again. If you're new here, or if you've we don't know each other very well. I went to university for visual communication. I studied double award art beforehand. It's kind of my world growing up is the arts, so I wish I did music, but I didn't. Too shy. So I'm hoping to kind of go back and relearn to draw and use a graphics tab to sketch, and mostly just for character designs and opening my imagination a bit more, because I feel like that then feeds back into my knitting. It enables me to be a bit more creative and be less tunnel vision almost. So I'll show you this sketch, and I'll actually try and put in the last quick doodle I did of her, and hopefully you'll see the difference. And what I hope to do is to maybe once a month, maybe every 2 months, we'll see, redraw her, and whilst in between doing a few different studies, so maybe looking at eyes and stylized eyes, or looking at ambient lighting. I just feel like that's something that's fun and I'd like to do. I've been doing some reading, but I won't talk about all of this stuff now because I've realised how long this is going to be. So yeah, I hope that you too find something that you love doing. I hope that you do something fun this week. Do something to be kind to yourself. Remember that you are blooming awesome. Please do, because even if for any reason today you don't feel like you are, you are. And most importantly, don't forget to love each other.